Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Steffi, for the introduction. I also hear some very common themes already that we will come back to. Apart from, I will not focus on the numbers of the situation we're in, because I think we know those well, but I will look for clues, for example, in the great leadership of the city of Munich for what we can do to create a better future. I'd say there are two things that very much resonate with me. One is we need better stories, and I hope that everyone in this room can take some better stories out with you today. And the second is, as we believe at Pace, that leadership can really inspire others to act as long as we act together. So the title of this talk is Postcards from the Future. And when people think about the future, and I think about also the way the DLD conference is structured, they almost always turn to technologies. In fact, science fiction writers have been some of the best at imagining technologies before they exist. If we think about mobile phones or credit cards or flying cars or other things, they've been brilliant at that. But where I think the real lesson of great science fiction lies is the ability to imagine alternative worlds, because technologies alone are not going to get us to where we need to go for a circular future. Out of interest, how many people in this room have read the works of Ursula K. Le Guin? Quick show of hands. A few, but not nearly enough. See me later for a reading list. One of her best stories in this world-building mode was one where there was an almost perfect world, a bit like Munich. The sun always shone, the buildings were beautiful, the people were beautiful, but the price was that there was a child kept in misery in the dark in perpetuity. And I think there are some lessons and some analogies, however uncomfortable, to the world that we're in today. We at Pace, actually, I realize I'm missing a clicker, so I may have to ask for advance of the slides. We actually see the circular economy as the opportunity and the framing narrative to create a better world. But as Martijn says, the devil's in the detail, and we have to really look deep into our systems rather than doing a policy here and there, a recycling bin here and there. That will not get us there. And at the moment, we treat the factory and the supply chain, the locus of industrial production, as if it's sort of on its own, disconnected from anything else. We talk about the supply chain, we talk about the circular economy. When we talk about it, it's really about products. It may be about product disposal, the extension of product life, but it's really products in isolation. And quite often, too often, it is about the disposal of the waste that we create in an efficient manner, otherwise known as recycling, rather than a complete reimagining of our production systems. So how did we get here? It's worth, when you think about the future, looking a little bit at the past. Could I have the next slide? If someone, great, thank you. Prior industrial revolutions, if you read the history of industrial revolutions, are often described as a kind of continuing paradigm of improvement. We have improved unit cost economics. We have improved manufacturing technologies. Germany has many excellent examples of continuous improvement in manufacturing, which is why it is world leading. So we almost always focus on this underlying mental model that the manufacturing of things in industrial revolutions and horizons get better because the economics get better and the technologies get better. There's a high degree of automation, robotics. I mean, it's basically made it much more predictable, which is obviously very good in manufacturing. No more of these pesky human needs like rights or sleep or food. You know, we have robots now, they're much easier. We can be much more cost effective. We can create dynamic supply chains in a way with all the information coming to our screens. If there is climate change, drought, or famine in a particular region, we just switch to a different one to source our materials. It's easy, very, very easy. And in the challenge of decarbonization, which has really been the one that has received the most attention, decarbonization is not equal to circularity. We now have the advantage that renewables are so cheap and so plentiful and so geopolitically attractive that being able to do the right thing for energy transition is actually the smart thing, the easy thing, and the all-about business thing. But we have, with the fifth industrial revolution, we have the opportunity and, in fact, the imperative to challenge the reconnection of our physical and virtual worlds, to reimagine our systems of production. So if I can just have the next slide, please. So this is a trick question, what have we learned? Because we've learned a lot, but in fact, the things we need to relearn or unlearn are some of the things we've already known. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of them here. We know a lot from the work in the 1970s on the limits to growth, which has been referred to a couple of times this morning already. We understand that all of our decisions are connected. Every action we take in business is not isolated from people, planet, and nature. They are all connected. Secondly, we also know that our system of economics does not help us make those connections in a rational way. It often privileges our short-term economic decisions, economically rational decisions, at the expense of creating quite a lot of expense elsewhere. And we know already inherently that the healthiest systems in the world, they are resilient because they are connected. And they also are resilient because they are rooted in place. And we'll talk about the importance of ecosystem in a minute. But we actually know that it is possible to think ecologically about industry and production rather than merely mechanically. Next slide, please. So where do we see opportunities or imperatives? The next industrial revolution must, from the beginning, reimagine industrial production rather than tweak it at the edges. We need to think beyond the local community of workers and supply chains that we've built to the wider world and think about how to rebalance. Of course, this will be helped by technology. I am by no means against technology. I used to be a technology investor, and I see a lot of huge, exciting potential. But I think some of the technological applications around data sets we haven't really exploited. For example, the ability to connect the impact of one set of production systems to a wider set of impacts. I do a lot of work in agriculture, and we know now that the inherent value of a carrot that is grown in better soil for human health is much, much higher. And we will in future be able to price in the benefits of that health so that the organic carrot no longer looks expensive, but extremely good value. And this kind of idea of thinking Mehrwert and, wertvoll, I live in Berlin, so my German's terrible, of course. But this way of thinking will really help us to value and make the decisions we need to in our production systems. But we also really have to rethink our economics. Whenever people say things like, it's not economically feasible, I really want to challenge their definition of economically feasible. And if I could, I would retrain all of our central bankers quite quickly. Thank you very much. But we also have to rethink our principles of distance. We have to see what is in front of us. I love Steffi's articulation of all of the species around us, because we have become somewhat blind. In our excessively cerebral world, we become blind to what is actually immediately around us and how that connects to everything else. So how do we get to this more integrated view? It sounds like a bit of a fantasy, doesn't it? But there are ways and there are senses, and there are also examples. I'll give you one example of a thinking system. Many of these exist across traditional, indigenous, or spiritual systems, but they really help us think about these practices. There's a wonderful biologist, climate educator, and storyteller called Spencer Scott, and he talks about becoming more of place. Our system currently dislocates us. It disconnects people. It strips people from their connection to their ecology and their inherent wisdom. Many industrial production companies actually give us the clue to a circular future. I'm sure some of them are here in Germany, and we'd love to have them join our PACE community and leadership group. But the reason they do that is because they are very firmly rooted in place. And I wanted to tell you a little story of one of our leadership group members as an example. One member of PACE's leadership group, Celsa, is a steelmaker. They are located, although they work across Europe, their headquarters and their heart is in Catalan in Spain. They took the initiative not just to invest in low-carbon steel technology and advocate for the benefits of decarbonization, but they went much further than that into true circularity by assembling a set of industrial conglomerate companies in very different industries on the surface: paper, retail, telecoms. And they did a mapping that figured out, talking about local loops, that they could create over 1 billion of value in euros by simply redefining how they treated waste streams. One person's waste is someone else's treasure. It would reduce their dependence on the external world in a world of fragile supply chains. But there's even more than that, because they recognized that this had benefits to the culture, and they challenged the public sector to really increase their targets for the use of recycled or repurposed materials, which were not ambitious enough. So they have acted in a way that goes well beyond decarbonization, well beyond business as usual, because they see the sense in this. And I think it is because they are family-run. They have a deep sense of their belonging to their community and also their status in the world. However, they haven't actually been able to find anyone to fund this work, which I think is one of the challenges that we face. So I'd love to hear from people who have any ideas for them about how to make this happen. Within all of our public and private sector leaders at PACE, we're all working together to work on these deep system-wide problems and challenges. We all do these things because we share a vision of the future that goes far beyond the balance sheet or business as usual, and we're not afraid to say it and to tell better stories. I think this moment does require some unusual and difficult conversations and some unusual leadership, and I'm thrilled to see all of you here because I'm sure you will be part of that solution. So just to conclude, before we recast the fifth industrial revolution as yet another paradigm shift in better unit cost economics and better technologies, I invite all of you to really think about how production can do far more than that, how we create production systems that we deserve for a fair, just, and resilient world. Thank you very much.